Now, it's one thing to showcase a tool using hypothetical or theoretical examples that you would rarely use in real life. But it's a completely other thing to display and demonstrate a tool with concrete real-world examples that you're probably going to be using in your apps in the future. And this is exactly what I decided to do in this BuildShip tutorial. BuildShip is extremely powerful, and I wanted to further showcase the power using real world examples that you're probably going to use at one point or another while building all kinds of apps. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I talk about on this channel, you can learn more and view and or clone them via our amazing Patreon community. And if you're still not a member of our incredible Patreon community, where you can get a ton of stuff, connect with other members, then you can learn more and hopefully become a member via the first link in the description below the video. Now, I made lots of videos about BuildShip, and that is because BuildShip can do lots and lots of different things. And I feel it's an amazing tool that gives you a ton of power in an easy to use package. And so in today's video, I want to give you guys real world scenarios and real world solutions that you can use BuildShip to help you, fit and kind of put in the missing pieces in your app and kind of get your app to work, exactly how you want it to work, okay? Because these are the things that you'll have to do at some point, and they're relatively hard to do without BuildShip, okay? So I have some workflows here that I'm going to be showing you. But first, if you're building a workflow, right, you typically have three things that you need to do, right? You need a trigger, which is going to be the first node here. Then you need a return node that may return something or may not return something. This is going to be optional, and this is going to be required, right? But in the middle of a typical workflow, you're going to have to create nodes. Now, if you click here and you want to create a node, right, basically, create some kind of a logic that does something useful, you're going to have lots and lots of options, right? So you're going to have your most popular nodes. Now, if you scroll down a little bit, you're going to be seeing flow nodes, right? And these are your standard nodes that, create some kind of a logic flow, right? Typically, you're going to be using these nodes. And then later on, you have your integrations, right? And these are the nodes that give BuildShip a lot of power because they give you free functionality. Okay, now in today's video, I want to focus on flow nodes because I feel that a lot of people do not understand how they work. They do not fully appreciate, and they underestimate the capability of these nodes. Okay, and so we're going to be covering flow nodes. Okay, and so the first node that I want to talk about is the parallel node, right? So if you click over here, you have your parallel node. Now, parallel nodes are awesome because they allow you to execute operations simultaneously. Okay, and so as you can see in this flow here, I have my parallel nodes, and in this case, I have two parallel nodes. Okay, and so these could be any nodes, right? I just decided to create two API calls. But these could be absolutely any nodes, and you can use, you can create an API call, or you can use some kind of a more complex node that BuildShip provides, right? So if you click here, you can scroll down and you can use one of these nodes. And so what's nice about parallel nodes is that you can execute multiple requests simultaneously. And this is extremely useful in all kinds of situations where you're trying to get data that is different, right? Maybe you're trying to do an API call with one endpoint, and you're trying to do another API call with another endpoint. And then later on, once you get all that data, you want to combine it in some way, or maybe do some more logic with this data. And so in this specific workflow, right, we have our REST API call trigger. This is your standard trigger that, if you execute, if you get this request here, right, using this get method, you're gonna trigger this workflow. And then here I have two API calls that execute this URL here. This is what you're going to be getting. You're going to be getting a user here, right? So we have here some user information, a JSON, and here we have another user, right? So that was user one, this is user two. Okay, so here we have some other user here. And so the idea is we're going to get this user one here, And then we're going to get this user2 here, and then we're going to output something, right? So if I come to this value, what I'm doing is I'm just outputting person1 is, the first name and last name of person1, and person2 is the first name and last name of person2. Okay, very, very simple, but it's powerful because we execute two separate calls. We wait for both of them to finish using this await, and then we decide to show the user, okay, we got some data from these two calls, and we can combine it together. Okay, so let's go ahead and test it out, right? And another thing I really like about BuildShip is this testing ability. Now, remember, you can test it on a specific node, and here's a quick pro tip. Okay, here's a very, very useful pro tip. So when you're creating a node, your nodes are gonna have inputs and outputs, right? So by default, your output is going to be empty, right? And it's useful to have something in the output. And so what you can do is you can execute this in the test mode here. You can run it and test it out and get the result and see if you're going to get a result at some point. As you can see, we have here a result here. And what you want to do is you want to click here, update output schema. This is an awesome feature. And I believe this was just added fairly recently because I don't remember seeing this. And now if you come back to this node and you go into output, you're going to have all the data from the JSON. This is really, really nice. A lot of no-code tools have this, and this is really, really awesome feature, okay? And so at this point, you have access to all the data, okay? And so let's go ahead and test this out so that you can see the response. And we're going to be testing out this whole workflow instead of testing out an individual node. So I'm going to click here and it's executed. And you can see this is executing. And this is the result that we're getting from this return node. Okay, and so now we see that person one is Emily Williams and person two is Michael Johnson. And this is because we have this setup here, right? We have this first name and last name and first name and last name, okay? And one thing I want to make real clear is that I'm using just API calls, right? You can create nodes that parse a website, that do, OpenAI API call, that, do something more complex. Maybe you can use an AI call to generate an image, or you can create, 3 different images using 3 different calls, right? So if you scroll down, you have lots and lots of cool options, and you can execute all of these in parallel and then do something later on with the data. So this is very, very powerful. And I also built a Flutterflow companion app that shows you how you can integrate BuildShip into a front-end no-code tool, right? So if I execute my app and I create a new session, you can see how this integrates together. All right, so here's our app. And if I click here, it should execute that BuildShip workflow and display the results here. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this. And there we see the results, the exact same thing that we saw when we did this testing here, except I have an app that basically calls it, gets the data and displays it in a very kind of nice and reactive way, okay? So this is our parallel functionality, right? Very, very powerful, lots and lots of amazing things that you can do with. Now, the next feature that I want to show you is the looping, okay? So what is looping? Well, looping is exactly what it says. It's the ability to loop over all the elements in an array and then do something with each of the elements. Okay, now there's many, many things that you can do with this functionality, but because the purpose of this video is to show you real world scenarios, I want to show you a true real world scenario that you may want to use or adapt in one of your future apps. And so the purpose of this workflow is to do something useful with this table here, right? So as you can see, we have a table here called orders. And the idea here is that we are trying to tell our users, our shoppers, if there is some order update, right? Order status update. And so as you can see, all of these are shipped, but we do not have a tracking number. And so what this workflow is going to do is it's going to go through each of these orders here, each of these rows, and attempt to get a tracking number from a third-party service. And if it does get a tracking number, it's going to update this field here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this workflow here. Now, we triggered this workflow with a REST API call, and this is certainly one way to trigger it, but I think a much more natural way to trigger it would be using a cron tab type of job, and that is a trigger that you can set to execute at a specific time or at a specific day or day of the week or something like this. And this is also very simple. You can simply delete this, come back here, and you want to select schedule cron. Okay, and so you can select this trigger here. And here you can specify, you can learn more about it, right? They have a URL, and this allows you to specify when you want this trigger to execute, right? Do you want it to execute like every Monday, or you want it to execute every hour or every 20 minutes, right? Very, very powerful. And you also have the time zone there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ship this right here, and then we're going to test it out to see if it does what we set out to do. All right, so it's successfully deployed, but instead of waiting for it to execute at a particular time, I'm gonna click on test, and I'm gonna test my workflow so that you can hopefully see the results. We're gonna run this workflow. Okay, so it is running right now. It's getting the rows, and for each row, it's trying to update it with maybe a new tracking number. Okay, so it finished. Let's go ahead and jump back to our Supabase. And as you can see, now we have tracking numbers for each of the records here. Now the tracking number is exactly the same, and that is for demonstration purposes only, but at least you can see that every record has been updated with a tracking number. And this way the user logs in and they're going to be seeing a tracking number. Okay. Now, how exactly does this work? Well, we have a schedule trigger here. And the next thing we're doing is we are using this get row Supabase that gets the rows. Okay, so we don't have a filter here, right? Because we're trying to get all the rows, right? We can filter these. And then we're using this loop here. Okay, so we pass to this loop node the rows, right? We basically pass the rows here. And if you come over here, you can see this get row, which is an array that we get back from here. And next is we have this loop body that gets executed for every single element here. So if we have 20 elements, as the case is in our table, this loop is going to execute 20 times. And so what we're doing is first we have a log message, right? We're basically logging the item. And this is very useful in order to see what the item is like, right? You know, what is the structure of the item, what kind of elements does it hold, things like that. Next, we execute an API call to connect to a third-party service. Okay, so I'm using this dummy JSON, and I'm basically executing an API call. And so if we execute this API call, this is what we're getting back, tracking number. And this is a random UPS tracking number, okay? Then we'll look at what we get back, okay? So I can test it out, right? So I can come over here and I can run this node, and that way you can see exactly what the node is gonna come back to, right? It's gonna say status 200, data tracking number, and you always wanna click here just to make, you know, things easier for yourself. And once we get back a tracking number, we have this update row that filters by the ID, right? So this item ID, remember we have this item right here. So we know what the item is, right? This item that's available to us. And so what we're saying is we're filtering by the item, right? Because we need to know, you know, which item to update. If we don't have the filter, it's going to update all the values. And here we're just saying tracking number is tracking number. And that is what's going to update and provide this value here. Okay. And so as a result, this gets updated. And so in the real world scenario, right, what you're probably going to be doing is you're going to execute this API call and provide the order ID or some other unique identifier. And that's going to come back with a unique tracking number or nothing if the order hasn't been shipped yet. And you can use that unique tracking number to update your data here, okay? Because this is going to change while this is going to be exactly the same. Now, the next feature I want to show you is the repeat functionality. Okay, and so what exactly is the repeat functionality? Well, this is a repeat node, and it's kind of like looping, except you're specifying that a body needs to repeat X amount of times. Okay, so here we have 3. You can obviously set it to anything else, but I just have it set to 3. And then what kind of scenarios, right? And what kind of situations will this repeat functionality be of use? Well, there are many scenarios where you may want to repeat the body X amount of times, right? Now, this is different from looping because we're not looping over elements. We're simply repeating X amount of times. Now, one common scenario where you might want to employ this repeat functionality is to retry calls that you may feel may fail. Okay, so as an example, we have here a workflow that gets triggered on a Supabase event. Okay, so in this case, this is a new insert. So if a record gets inserted in this table, this workflow will get triggered. And this is a very, very useful trigger. Okay, I use this all the time because it makes a lot of sense in a lot of situations. Okay, as you're going to be seeing in some of these other examples as well. And so a new record is inserted in this table here, okay? And we have here a repeat node that will repeat this node here 3 times, okay? And what exactly is the body? Well, we're gonna be doing an API call, but we wanna make sure that the API call is successful. So here I have a condition and I'm checking if the status is 200. 200 means that it is successful. If the status is 200, we want to execute a update row. We want to update some data in the database. Well, more specifically, update this newly inserted row. If it's a failure, right, we want to sleep a specific amount of time. Now, attention, I'm using a kind of a very simple algorithm that's actually pretty useful. I'm taking the index, right? So initially the index is going to be like 1, then it's going to be 2, then it's going to be 3, etc., etc. And I'm taking this index and I'm multiplying it by 2. And so the idea here is that we don't want to sleep a fixed amount, right? If it fails the first time, we want to sleep for a little bit. If it fails the second time, we want to sleep more. If it fails for the third time, we want to sleep even more. And so as it keeps failing, we don't want to keep hitting this API endpoint within the same delay, right? We want to expand our delay. We want to make it bigger. And this is very, very common in more kind of more sophisticated apps, because you don't want to, you don't want to just, sleep for 2 seconds every time. You want to increase that time, right? Because you don't want to just hammer the server. And so the idea here is that, a new support ticket is entered into the system and we need to execute an API call. Okay, this is just another dummy API call. And if we're successful, we want to find that record that was just inserted and we want to update it that we notified the manager. Okay, so this is a support ticket, and so we want to make sure that the manager has been notified. Now, if your trigger is a Supabase trigger, you can't really test it out. Okay, so we need to create a new record in our Supabase database just to see how this whole flow works. Okay, and so if we jump back to Supabase, I have this table here called support tickets, and when a new ticket is created, this workflow gets triggered. Okay, so we can create a row here, or we can jump into our app and do it from there. And so if I go to this page here, this repeat, we can enter a new ticket into the system, thus triggering that workflow. Okay, so let's say I'm entering a new ticket and I'm using the app, and I want the customer support to know about this, right? So I'm going to say priorities high. I'm going to say my name is James@james.com, and I'm going to say the app times out a lot. There are lots of bugs. Okay, so I'm entering a ticket. I'm going to press go. It's going to say support ticket added. I'm going to jump to my database. I should have another row right here. This is the row that I entered. And now, as you can see, this field here, notified manager, by default, it is false. But because the workflow was executed, now it's set to true. And so if we jump to our BuildShip workflow here, and we expand this log area here, and we even refresh it, we should see a brand new success here. So if we expand it, you can see how everything happened, right? So we have a request here, and this is our request, right? So if you head over to body, you're going to be seeing our that this is what triggered it, right? So this is this trigger here. So as you can see, it's an insert. We don't have an old record because we're not updating, we're not deleting anything. We are simply creating a new record. So if you come to record, you can see that this is our record here. The app times out a lot, lots of bugs. Now, if you scroll down, you're going to find repeat here, which is this thing here. So we're going to go to repeat. We're going to open this up. And as you can see, we have this API call here, right? So we're executing this API call input, right? We're just getting this data here. This is the data that we're getting back. Status is 200. Data is here, right? So as you can see, all the data is right here. And because status is 200, branch is then. This is this branch here, right? As you can see, it says then. If for any reason this was false, it would have went to this branch here. You would have seen else. But because it says then, update row is executed, and then, this is our call right here. And you can even take a look at the filter. It says the ID is 133 because that is the ID of this new record that was created. And you can see that the data is this notified manager, and this is what it sent. Okay, and so that way you can see exactly what happened. And as a result, our field was updated, right? And so if this API call timed out the first time, it would have retried a couple of more times with this, ever increasing sleep, with this timeout, with this kind of delay, if you will. And so this is another very, very useful functionality that will be helpful in specific use cases, right? If you need to charge a user and the system is timing out, right? Maybe you're trying to charge their credit card, but it's not able to charge the user. So in that case, you don't want to give up right away. You want to try a couple of more times, right? You might want to try a couple of times today. You might want to try, in 24 hours, right? And so, but you may only want to try a fixed amount of times. And this is why this is so useful. Let's say I only want to charge the credit card 10 times. I want to try now. I want to try in an hour, maybe in 2 hours, maybe in 4 hours, etc., etc. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to set it to 10 times. And this here, this sleep, is going to follow a specific algorithm, right? And so I might take the index, multiply it by 2, multiply it by 3, etc., etc., thus expanding this delay each time I am trying to charge to charge the credit card. Okay, so this is another scenario. Obviously, there's tons of other scenarios that are going to be applicable in this specific situation. Okay, now the next feature that I want to show you is going to make your life a lot easier if you're doing what I'm about to show you. And this is the switch functionality. Okay, so you can click on here and you're going to be seeing the switch. Now, switch is awesome because it simplifies the process of another feature that I'm going to be showing you right after switching. But switching is different than this other feature, okay? And so the idea here is you have your trigger, and then you're going to have an expression. And so we have here an expression. And here you can just list the cases, and these are the results. So if this is the expression, and let's say the expression, the result is 1, that's first case. If the result is 2, it's another case. If the result is 3, it's another case. This is awesome when you're expecting specific answers, specific results. If you know what the results are going to be, at least you care about these specific results and don't really care about something else. Okay, so let me show you another real world scenario. Okay, so if I jump back to our database here, we have the support tickets table here. So remember I showed you how if a new ticket is entered, it changes this field here, or it retries this third-party API call and eventually changes it here. Well, another situation that can be very, very useful is to take a specific action depending on the priority, right? So if a new ticket is entered and the priority is high, we may want to do one thing, maybe notify the manager or notify the CTO or maybe notify the CEO, right? If the ticket is medium, we may want to take another action, maybe send an email instead of calling, instead of sending an SMS. And finally, if the priority is low, we might send an email, do something low key. Okay, this is another very much a real world scenario, and using this switch functionality makes it super easy and straightforward, okay? So we have the super base trigger, and what we're looking for is this priority, right? And the priority can typically be, one of three things, either high, medium, or low. And that is why I have these three cases here, right? So case one is high, case two is medium, and case three is low, right? And so these are our three cases. And depending on each specific case, we might want to take a different action. Now, in this scenario here, I'm not taking any actions. I just have a log node to record that it was executed. And that way we can test whether the whole thing works here, okay? So let's go ahead and create another ticket. So here we are back here on this switching functionality. And let's say I create another ticket. Let's say it's hi, and I enter my name, my email, and I say something, hey, your app is broken. Okay, this is a big problem, right? It doesn't work, it doesn't load, priority is high. I'm gonna click on go, and now it's a support ticket added. And now if we jump over here, we have this here. Now this executed is true, but now we have another workflow. Okay, this was also executed, and hopefully it should have went down this branch here. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what happened. We have our logging area here. Let's go ahead and refresh it, and now we see a new log entry, and this is what was just executed. So we have our request, go into body, insert, take a look at the records, and it says here, hey, your app is broken, right? And so this was the record that was created that triggered this workflow. Now, if we scroll down, we have the switch. Now, what is the switch? Which one of these cases was executed? Well, as you can see, it says here, starter case one. And this is this case one here. And so if we come over here, log message, you can see that the log message, this is the log message, right? Priority high. So it basically, this is this record here. As you can see, this record here is the log message. And so here we're logging the whole record. But what's important here is that it went down this path here. Now, let's say we enter a new ticket. So we come back over here, and this time we select medium. And I fill it in, James at james.com. Description is, hey, this feature is timing out. Please fix. Okay, we press go, support ticket added, go back to our database, take a look at here, and this is what it says. Hey, this feature is timing out, medium. Now we go back to BuildShip, refresh our logging over here, see it here, open it up, scroll down, we see the new record. Hey, this feature is timing out, please fix, priority is medium. Scroll down, and here we can click here. This is now selected. And so this feature is awesome if you are doing something that requires conditions and you know what the results, you care about only certain types of results, right? So I only care about 3 results, and this is default. This is where it's gonna go if it does not match any of this. That is the idea. And so here you can display something like, oh, we got an unexpected result or something like this, right? But typically in this case, I only care about these 3 results, and I want to take a specific action on a specific result, depending on what the result is. So this case makes it super easy to create this type of workflow where you know exactly what the results are and you're looking to take a specific action on a specific result. Last but not least, I want to show you the branching feature. Okay, so what is branching? Well, if you come over here, you can select branching here. Now, branching is kind of the standard behavior, right? If you think about all of these other ones, right? Loop, repeat, parallel, and switch, they're all fairly specific. They do something specific, whereas branching is kind of the default when you have your typical if, then, else condition, right? So if you have a workflow and you're trying to take a specific action and you're not really sure, you're not really clear on, the different scenarios that might happen, right? If you know the scenarios, you should be using the switch. If you only care about whether it's going to be true or not true, you should be using branching. And so branching is probably what many of you are going to be using by default because, there's lots and lots of scenarios where branching is applicable as opposed to some of these other ones, right? So let me show you a real world scenario that I'm sure many of you are going to love and find super useful. Okay, and so the idea here is that, let's say somebody is using your app and they're paying for a service, okay, and they decide they want to cancel membership. Okay, well, in this scenario, we don't want to just simply say, okay, well, you want to cancel, okay, good, you cancel, you're done. We want to give them another offer. We want to see maybe they're interested in downgrading, paying less for a different service, or maybe we want to give them some freebies. And so instead of canceling them right away, we want to provide them with another offer and see if maybe they're going to be interested in this other offer. If not, we're just going to cancel them, okay? This is something that I know Amazon does when they're Prime membership, right? You can't just cancel right away. They give you another offer. They give you some freebies. Maybe they lower the price or they extend the trial period or something like this. This is at least what I noticed. And so this is a perfect scenario where you want to be using this branching, okay? And so let me show you exactly what's happening. So once again, we have a Supabase trigger here that listens on this cancellations table. And so if I jump back to my Supabase here, you can see that I have this cancellations table here. And if we load this table, you can see that there's lots of different fields. And this allows us to track where the user is in terms of canceling their service, okay? And so there's lots of things happening, but the best way to understand is to take a look at this flow here. So if this is a new record in this table, which means that the user is trying to cancel, we're going to check a couple of conditions. First is we're going to take a look at this condition, meaning that this is a new record, meaning that the user is trying to cancel, right? They just try to cancel. They are not trying to do something else. They're not responding to a new offer. They're basically doing the first step in the process, right? So if they're trying to cancel, and here we're listening on insert and update, not just insert. And so if they're trying to cancel for the first time, this is going to be an insert. We're going to come over here, and here we need to send them a new offer. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we're going to find this record, and we're going to say that the retention offer sent is true, meaning that we've sent the offer, and here we send the offer, right? We're basically sending an email that says, don't leave, try our new offer or try this other service. And the message is, here's a new offer, okay? So at this point, the user gets an email and they're gonna be taking an action. Maybe they're gonna get redirected to another form, another page. You know, this is gonna get triggered again because we're updating a record, but this time, because this is no longer an insert, it's an update, this is not gonna get triggered. This will only get triggered. But once again, we have another branch here, right? So this is the first branch. This is the second branch. And here we're checking if they accepted a new offer, right? So we can even rename this and say, accepted new offer, okay? And how do we know if they accepted the new offer? Well, that is a field that's going to be set, okay? Depending on, the action that they take, okay? And so if they did not accept this new offer, we are going to, cancel their account. We're going to find this here, data, and we're going to send them a survey. And the survey is going to say, okay, thank you so much for, being a member. We understand you want to cancel. You did not accept this offer. We're going to send them an email that's going to say, okay, just take our survey, let us know how we can do better. On the other hand, if they accept the offer, we are going to update this table. We're going to say accepted new offer is true. And we're going to be sending them this email here. Your new plan, here's your new plan. Okay. And so as a quick example, let's go ahead and head back to our app here. All right. So let's say I want to cancel the service. So here I'm on the cancel service form here. And let's say it's too expensive. This is my user ID. And I write something like this. I'm sorry, but I decided that it's just too expensive for me right now. And at this point, I press cancel service. It says cancellation request sent. I head back to my database here. And it says, this is my record. I'm sorry, but I decided that it's just too expensive. And now let's head back to BuildShip and let's see what's happening here, right? So we're going to open our logs, refresh that. We see a new log record, right? So we have a request. We're going to open this up. And if we take a look at the body, we can see that the request has an insert type. The type is insert, which means that this should hopefully execute. Scroll down, and now you see the branch, right? New record, user trying to cancel. This is this right here. And if you expand it, you're going to see then, which means that it is true. And this was executed, right? We're going to expand this. And now these two nodes were executed, right? Retention offer sent. This is where it updates this record to say that the retention offer was sent. Okay, so that we know where we are. Okay, so the input is this. The output is this right here. We take a look here, and now it says retention offer sent is true. And now if we jump back to our Supabase, you can see that this is now true. By default, it's false. But because that node was executed and we sent the email here, we can update that node. So next time, if we do anything, it's not, it's not going to send that offer again because it knows where we are. Okay. And so now we need to trigger this. Now, in a real world scenario, this is going to be triggered by some kind of a page, some kind of a flow. But here we can do it automatically. And so here, let's say accepted new offer is true. Okay, so I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to update this, right? I'm going to say it's true. Okay, so let's say it's true. And now because I've just updated this field that is going to be updated by some kind of a flow, this whole thing gets triggered again. And because accepted new offer is true, guess what is going to be executed, right? Not this thing here, because this is the false, this is the true. So if we take a look here, let's go ahead and refresh it. Take a look at this latest record. We see this is the update one, right? And so here, new record, it's not new record, so it goes into else. And then accepted new offer, else, which means that this is true, which means that that they have accepted the new offer, right? So I have it set to false, this is false, and this is true, right? So actually this should be not accepted the new offer in this case. So it's not that confusing, right? Not accepted new offer, no, accepted the new offer, right? So this is gonna get executed, and this is what gets executed. So it accepted the new offer, this thing here, and then it sends congrats here, okay? If that was false, then this would have gotten executed, okay? And so as a result, we can create lots and lots of conditions here that follow a certain flow, follow a certain logic, depending on your specific use case. Now, I want to give you a couple of tricks here. I like to move my conditions, so to speak, to the right, right? So here we have this retention offer sent. Here we have not accepted, but my final result, what I want it to be on the right-hand side. Okay, that is just how I do. You can have it on the left-hand side if you want, but if you're going to be creating lots of different flows, you may have tons and tons of conditions. And so it helps to kind of organize them in a flow, right? So we send the retention offer, they did not accept, or they've accepted. Okay, so I kind of look at it from the left to the right. Right, so from this, from this initial stage to this final stage where they accepted the offer. So it's really up to you how you want to structure it, but it helps to kind of have some kind of a structure at least. And so this is the branching functionality, and this is your standard if, then, else conditions that you see in all kinds of code, right? And so it should not be a surprise that you can easily do it here in BuildShip. And once again, my goal here was to show you a real world scenario, not just something totally, banal and something that will never happen, something so basic, but a real world scenario that you guys will at some point will need to implement in your apps. Okay, so once again, we have this parallel functionality. We have looping here. Okay, so the ability to loop over elements. And once again, I wanted to show you a real world scenario. We have repeating, which is useful for retrying API calls, retrying something X amount of times. We have switching, which is kind of like branching. Well, it is like branching, except in this case, I am expecting specific results. I know that the result might be, in this case, a priority of high, medium, or low. And so I create conditions to deal with these events. But I also have a default condition which gets executed if none of these conditions are met. Okay, which could be useful in situations where you're not expecting something to execute, maybe in some kind of errors or things of that nature. And last but not least, we have branching, which is great for creating all kinds of useful, simple to complex flows as you saw in our case when we are trying to create this user cancellation, this service cancellation flow, instead of just canceling right away, we want to give them an option of maybe downgrading the service or a couple of freebies or something else. And you can easily implement this using this branching functionality. And so, like I said before, BuildShip just is very much underrated because it can do so many amazing things for real world scenarios, right? Real world app scenarios that would be very difficult to do otherwise, right? And really, you should not be doing these scenarios, right, as they get more complex in your no-code tool of choice, such as Flutterflow. You should be using a backend integration tool for a lot of these backend scenarios so that you can separate them from your app, test them separately. As you can see, it's very easy to test them. It's very easy to make sure things are working, right? Because this is a specialized tool specifically for these kinds of backend tasks. And so definitely head over to buildship.com to learn more about this amazing tool. If you're not yet familiar with it, go ahead, sign up for a free account and start building workflows today. Now, if you guys like this tutorial and you want more no-code content, definitely check out our amazing Patreon community. Not only will you get access to all the stuff that I talked about in this video, you'll also get access to all the other resources for pretty much all the other tutorials that I cover on this channel. And that means you can view the apps, you can also clone them, you can also get additional content, connect with other members in the community, ask questions if you have any issues with the apps that you find on there, and really join the best no-code community out there. And in addition to that, you'll be supporting this channel and supporting my work. And so if you're getting value from the work that I provide, if it's helping you accomplish something, maybe you're having an aha moment, or maybe you found a tutorial that teaches you how to build an app that you are maybe building right now or thinking about building in the future, then you're going to get a ton more content inside of our Patreon community. And so if all of that sounds good, go ahead and click the first link in the description to learn more and hopefully become a member.